That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
All right, guys, we are so close to the fantasy football playoffs where I know the majority of people watching this channel actually have their playoff spot already clinched up, where we're really not even going to have to be worrying about winning these next 2 weeks to make sure that in week 14 we have our spot guaranteed. I know a lot of y'all are either 8-3, 9-2, extremely strong performances based off of everything that I've been seeing in the YouTube comments, everything that I've been hearing in the live streams. So what that tells me is that it's time to start gearing up for the fantasy football playoffs. Start looking at these schedules and these matchups way before our opponents do. That way we can go get some discounts on these target players, guys that we think are going to be highly productive in weeks 14, 15, and 16, because that is when you should be playing your fantasy football playoffs. That allows 6 teams to be in the playoffs. It allows a bye for the first 2 seeds, and then you play until week 16 where you finally have a champion. We don't want to be going until week 17 because we know that some teams are going to be resting their key starters. And the last thing you want to do is draft a Patrick Mahomes, ride him to the championship all season, and then in week 17, you don't have him. We're not going to want to deal with that. We are just going until week 16. And if y'all have not already, guys, please go down there, drop a like on the video. Really helps us out. Also, subscribe to the channel if you have not. I'd imagine that everybody watching is already subscribed. But anyway, let's get in here and let's talk about our first wide receiver who had a fantastic performance last night, Cooper Kupp. Now, I know I actually made this list before that performance by Cooper Kupp last night, where now it's actually going to cost a lot more to go out there and acquire him. I think a lot more people are going to be onto him. And really, everything that I love about Cooper Kupp is based around the matchups that he has in weeks 15 and 16. So in week 14, he's going up against the New England Patriots. Not really something that we're too worried about, as that Patriots defense has been significantly worse in 2020, as they suffered a lot of opt-outs, as they are going through injuries, and their overall defense is just a lot older. In week 15, they're going up against the New York Jets. Obviously, that is going to be a complete smash spot. Then in week 16, the best matchup you could ever ask for, the Seattle Seahawks, who just get toasted by the wide receivers every single week. That game should turn into a shootout. I know it was not exactly ideal when we saw the Los Angeles Rams play the Seattle Seahawks earlier this season, but I think if both of these teams regress in that matchup to what they usually are, we could expect fireworks in that one. So with Cooper Kupp, I think right now you could probably go out there and acquire him at a mid to high end wide receiver 2 price. And during the fantasy football playoffs, he could easily be a top 6 wide receiver. I will say also, looking at Robert Woods, he's going to be intriguing as well, but I am very worried about the Josh Reynolds usage in this offense in terms of what we're going to be expecting from Robert Woods and his overall projection down the line, because with Josh Reynolds, obviously, he's never going to completely supplant a player like Robert Woods for that wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2 role on this offense. But what he is going to be doing is he's going to be running a significant amount of routes, and he's going to be stealing some targets away from Robert Woods. And I think Cooper Kupp's actually a little bit safer here, as Cooper Kupp operates in a different area of the football field. All right, so now let's get to our second wide receiver, another player that had a decent performance this past week, Chris Godwin. Guys, with Chris Godwin, I think that we have to just say here officially that he is the #1 wide receiver for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Yes, I know Antonio Brown looks great. Yes, I know Mike Evans has been coming down with some touchdowns. But if you're looking at through the entire season, what player has been consistently seeing the targets, that is actually going to be Chris Godwin. We actually see that Mike Evans goes almost invisible in most matchups where Chris Godwin is active, where Evans is really relying on that touchdown volume, and clearly Evans is a touchdown machine. But here with Godwin, I think that he's actually the safest wide receiver for this Tampa Bay room. I think that he's very similar to what we're looking at with a Deontay Johnson in Pittsburgh, where maybe you could say that Antonio Brown's the Juju, Mike Evans is the Chase Claypool, Chris Godwin is the Deontay Johnson, and I think that role is going to be the safest that we want in the offense. And in week 14, he's going up against the Minnesota Vikings, an average pass defense. Then week 15, probably one of the best matchups you could ever ask for, against the Atlanta Falcons. Week 16 going up against the Detroit Lions. And what's also great about Chris Godwin is this Tampa Bay Buccaneers team is not going to be able to take the foot off the gas if they want to go in strong into the playoffs, get a decent seed. So here with Tom Brady, I think that he's going to continue to progress in this offense with all of these weapons. Godwin is going to maintain that consistent wide receiver role on this team. Clearly, there'll be a little bit of volatility week to week, like we saw this past week with an Antonio Brown and a Mike Evans, but Chris Godwin is the wide receiver from the squad that I want. All right, so now coming in here, our third wide receiver spot, Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen, guys, we are going to be talking about him so much. Currently, he's the wide receiver 2 in points per game with Justin Herbert under center for this Los Angeles Chargers offense. And in the playoffs, he has a fantastic schedule. The Atlanta Falcons in Week 14. Clearly, that game can easily turn into a shootout. Then the Las Vegas Raiders in Week 15, the Denver Broncos in Week 16. Now, I'll say neither one of those matchups are particularly fantastic, but they are very strong for Keenan Allen. And we know with Justin Herbert, this Los Angeles Chargers offense is going to be one of the most productive offenses in the entire NFL. And considering this is Justin Herbert's rookie season, I think that we could continue to see this offense really progress and only get better as the year goes on. We know Keenan Allen is seeing about 30% of his team's targets every single week with Justin Herbert locking onto him. So there are very few wide receivers I'd want over Keenan Allen in fantasy football at the moment. Really, outside of a Tyreek Hill and a Devontae Adams, I don't know if we can throw anybody ahead of Keenan Allen, especially given this fact that he has a strong playoff schedule. All right, so now our next wide receiver, one of the most polarizing wide receivers in fantasy football, but I'm still going to stand by the fact that I think he's a fantastic value, Tyler Lockett. I really hope y'all started Tyler Lockett this past week like I advised. I hope that you went out there and traded for Tyler Lockett on the low like I said 2 weeks ago, because in the fantasy football playoffs, he actually has a very strong schedule himself. The New York Jets in Week 14, the Washington football team in Week 15, and the LA Rams in Week 16. And I know the Rams are really strong with Jalen Ramsey, but Ramsey is going to be on DK Metcalf for the majority of that matchup. So I think that's actually a spot where we could project Tyler Lockett to possibly turn into the wide receiver 1 for his own team. And if he's the wide receiver 1 for the Seattle Seahawks, we know that he has that upside to be the wide receiver 1 overall in fantasy football. And because this is going to be the fantasy football playoffs, where you're not going to be going up against the worst team in your league. No, you're going up against a team that is almost as talented as yours, if not better than yours. What we are looking for is we are looking for that ceiling. We want a player that's going to be able to come in here, give you 30 points when you need it most, because you're going to need a very high score to win that championship, to be able to go out there and progress through the rounds and end up with the money at the end of the season. And I think Tyler Lockett really possesses that upside that can get you there. Currently a high end, actually probably a mid wide receiver 1 in points per game. I think last I checked, he was sitting around wide receiver 6. I know he's going to be a little bit volatile week to week, but really, I am willing to bring on that volatility when it's going to come with it, that elite level ceiling. So here, Tyler Lockett, I think we have to go and send some offers for. All right, so now our last wide receiver, someone that's going to be a little bit controversial, Terry McLaurin. Guys, Terry McLaurin, I know, has some of the worst quarterback play in the entire NFL, but we are seeing him consistently provide us elite level volume in this Washington offense. And in the fantasy football playoffs, his schedule is actually very nice himself. The 49ers in Week 14. The 49ers are nothing close to what they were a season ago in terms of their overall defensive strength. Then the Seattle Seahawks in Week 15. Clearly, the Seattle Seahawks is probably the best matchup for any wide receiver in football, as the Seahawks are going to put points up on the board. It's going to create the opposing team to really go out there with a pass-happy approach, and they have very, very weak cornerbacks on the outside. And then the Carolina Panthers in Week 16. Now, I know the Panthers looked very, very strong this past week against the Detroit Lions, but that was in a game with no Kenny Golladay. That was in a game with no DeAndre Swift, no Danny Amendola. So clearly the Lions were handicapped in what we were going to be able to expect from them in terms of moving the ball down the field. So I think that Panthers defense at best is average, probably below average in my own opinion, as I thought that was going to be one of the worst defenses in the entire NFL coming to the season. They definitely have proven to be better than I initially thought, but still not near the top of the league. Now, thank you guys. I really hope y'all enjoyed this video. I really hope y'all got something from it. As always, if y'all did, go down there, drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. Really, really helps us out. And I'm going to be live streaming every single night this week, except on Thursday. So I really hope I'll see y'all there.